what we're going to do is we'll talk about doing machine learning and AI in Power BI. So my name is Imran Burki. Just some background about myself. I'm a data and AI cloud solution architect at Microsoft. I've been with Microsoft just probably about 8 months. So I do a lot of things with Power BI, but mostly since the last 8 months, it's been a lot of data platform related content that I've really been focusing on. So it's good to get back into Power BI every now and then. And I've got at least 15 years of experience just in like analytics in general, a lot of data warehousing, ETL, and all that good stuff. My interests are really in machine learning, AI, and deep learning. I'm currently in the Masters of Analytics program at Georgia Tech, just started that. So this is a pretty interesting topic for me. I'm no means an expert in this area, but I do know some of the basics with ML and AI. I live in Minnesota. I'm in the Twin Cities, and thank you very much, Brian, for having me here at your user group. I'm also on the board of PassMN, so that's just a little bit about me. From a professional side of things, personally, I'm from New Jersey. I moved here 8 years ago. I have got 3 kids, so I don't really have like time for fun. You know, they're all under 9, so they take up a lot of my time. But I do, whenever I get a chance, like to follow sports, run, lift, and I recently started playing cricket. Never thought I would ever play that sport, but it's pretty interesting and very different than baseball, even though you have a bat and you have a ball. So that's just a little bit about myself. So let's get into the actual topic at hand here and what we're going to discuss. First, we're going to look at automated machine learning in Power BI, and this is going to be all in the Power BI service using data flows, or what's typically known as AutoML. Next, we'll look at how can Power BI integrate with Azure Machine Learning. So how do we actually invoke a model that we created in Azure Machine Learning into Power BI? That'll be followed by some AI topics. So there's integration with cognitive services in Power BI. We're just going to look at a couple examples of text analytics, but there is also vision as well. And then we'll go into some of the AI visuals in Power BI, specifically Q&A. We'll look at smart narratives. I'm not really a big fan of decomposition trees, so I don't really have a good example of that. And I've never personally seen anybody use it in the field, but that is also available in Power BI. We'll look at quick insights and anomaly detection, and we'll finally wrap that up with integrating Jupyter notebooks in Power BI and Python, not R, but we use Python in Power BI. A little, just very, very basic examples of these. One thing to know is before you do any, like, any kind of machine learning in Power BI, or if it's like AutoML in here, or even AutoML in Azure Machine Learning, just some basic concepts would help, right? So hopefully you guys are familiar with some of these concepts. If you're not, I'll try, please feel free to ask questions and I'll answer them to the best of my ability, okay? So let's actually get started with the first topic, which is machine learning and AutoML and Power BI. There's a couple requirements that we need before we get started in Power BI to do AutoML. The first thing is this can only occur in a premium capacity. So it's got to be PPU or per capacity premium. In my example, I've got a PPU capacity, but it works just the same exact way with premium. And this is only available when you have a data flow. So you can only create these models in data flows, and they're only available in the Power BI service. The other thing also I forgot to mention, with everything we're doing here today, we're just going to do a couple clicks here and there, and you'll see how easy it is to get the model up and running, okay, in Power BI. And one thing also to note, whenever we're doing AutoML in Power BI, it could be a little slow. So doing AutoML in Power BI, it might be good just to, like, if you want to dabble in machine learning and you don't know where to start, and you've got Power BI Premium, this might be a great place for you to go before you make like a significant investment in, Azure ML, or like, start learning Python and other libraries or stuff like that. This might be a pretty good intro to the topic and get you started pretty quickly. So we'll look at AutoML, and then we'll look at integration with Azure Machine Learning. So we have a Azure Machine Learning model already created and deployed. How do we actually take advantage of that in Power BI? And that can occur in the desktop, or it could occur in the Power BI service. There's no premium license needed. However, you do need a separate Azure Machine Learning service subscription. And the models, and it must be deployed either in AKS, like Azure Kubernetes, or Azure Container Instance within Azure Machine Learning. They have to be deployed in those two areas essentially, either or. Pick your poison, right? But after you deploy them there, you can start generating brand new predictions on your data set, leveraging the model. So with AutoML in Power BI, only supports 3 categories in machine learning, and these are just basically supervised models. It does not support any unsupervised models. We're going to look at regression, but it does also support general classification. So it just classifies things into multiple categories. So think of an example of maybe a retailer that wants to do targeted marketing and they want to classify people in certain buckets. We can do that with just general classification methods. It does a binary prediction, right? Whether or not you're going to win the NBA finals, or whether or not you're going to have diabetes, or heart disease. So it's like a yes or no answer. There's only 2 classes. It does that as well, and then it does regression. So regression is just predicting like a numerical outcome. In our example, we're going to predict house prices in Kansas City. Very common data set that's used in machine learning, just in general, whenever you're getting started. And the other thing also is when you get into the data flow, you'll notice that there's a couple extra outputs and tables that Power BI is going to create, and we'll talk briefly about those. But that's what you're seeing here, right? So result is literally the result of the model that it created, and these are just explanations of that model. So we're going to look at regression, and this is basically just like a top 5 items in the data set that we're going to work with. So remember, we're going to create a model that's going to predict the house prices for houses in Kansas City. Now, there's a bunch of variables that we can use, and these are all the variables that we're going to work with. So things typically that are related to the price of a house, right? Like square footage, number of floors, how many bathrooms, where is this located? A lot of these in the zip code, these are variables that have an impact to price. So our training data set is going to have price. Scoring data set, the scoring data set is the data set we're actually going to invoke our model on. And what we mean by that is there's no price in here. So this scoring data set is something that we're going to apply to the machine learning model, so that next time the data flow refreshes, it's going to have a price prediction associated with it. And it'll have that because that model has all of these variables inside of it, and it's going to predict the price based off of the AutoML model that was generated. Okay. Any questions so far?
Not so far.
Cool. And then the second thing is this is going to be really easy to set up and view, but and I'm not going to do the Azure ML part of it. If you guys are interested in Azure ML, I'd be more than happy to give you. I mean, this is a Power BI user group, so we're not going to like dig into the details. But if you're interested in it, you can I can come back and talk to you about it. But in our case, we're actually going to leverage an existing model in Azure Machine Learning and take a look at how do we use that model to generate predictions on brand new data that the model hasn't seen yet. Okay, so these are the 2 basics of Azure Machine Learning and what we're going to do. But from just machine learning in general in Power BI, but from an Azure Machine Learning perspective, there's like a couple things we have to do. First, we obviously have to build the model. in Azure ML, and that model could be using AutoML in Azure Machine Learning. It could be using the designer, or you can just use the SDK. It doesn't matter. As long as it's deployed in one of these two container types, we're good to go. And whoever wants to get access to that model has to have read access to the model in the portal. And then we basically access it within Power BI desktop or service and invoke the model. So let's get started. That's enough of me talking about these slides. So let's actually get started, okay, with AutoML first, and then invoking the model in Power BI. So here's our data flow. We've got our training data set over here, and we've got a scoring data set, all part of the same data flow. These extra items, these are the extra things that I mentioned that Power BI is going to create. So initially, what I did here is I just brought in a table called KC housing training data, and it contains all of the variables plus the price, okay? And then I brought in the housing scoring data. That's all that was here in this data flow. Once I created a model in machine learning and AutoML, it started creating these additional tables. So what these tables do is AutoML is going to generate a training set, and then it's going to generate a testing set, and then it's going to generate a couple extra tables. And right here, our regression result is the actual result of what the model predicted. Okay, so that's what it's basically generating here behind the scenes. So once we have this table here as our training data, what we could actually do is click on this brain icon, or we can go into machine learning models. We'll just go into here. We can start adding machine learning model. I already have one here, which we're going to look at, and we're not going to go through this whole process. I'm just going to show you how it's done, because it does take some time to actually implement. The first step is, what do we want to predict? Okay, the outcome column is going to be price, because we're going to predict our price. Next thing Power BI is going to do is actually going to look at the data behind the scenes, and it's going to say, okay, based off of what I've seen, I'm going to select the appropriate model for you. And a lot of times this is pretty accurate, right? It's going to select the proper model. In this case, it's selected regression. We can select a different model, but it's not going to make any sense for us here. So let's stick with the regression. Next step is just think of like what a data scientist would normally do, right? They'll look at correlations of these variables versus price. If something is highly correlated, it'll take it out. If it's low correlation, if it's highly correlated price, we'll keep it. If it's low, we'll remove it. Power BI, AutoML is doing all of that for us. But we also have the ability to check these. Like we might have better understanding of the business requirements and the business in general. So maybe we say, yeah, this is pretty highly correlated with price, so assist, and I want to start checking these and incorporate those into the model. We'll just leave this as blank. So it does a lot of that, model, the variable selection for us. The next step is just to really give this a model name. And I'm not going to give it a model name, but we can give it in the model name. We save and train it. And once it's done training, we're going to actually come up with a machine learning model right over here. And we can view a training report on this model. So the training report is basically going to tell us, like, this is a regression model, right? So it's going to give us our R squared, and it's going to tell us some facts about our residuals, for example, and just basic things about how it did the actual training. So our R squared is pretty high, right? 88%, which is pretty good. We can also take a look at top predictors, and which we would say, like, okay, yeah, this is pretty accurate, right? Square footage, location of lat long, the year built. These are top predictors of a house price. And then we can see what the breakdown is and what the average outcome of price is. So a house that's more than 8,000 square foot, the average price, is probably, there's around like $8 million, right? Which is, again, pretty accurate. And same thing with latitude, longitude. You can see various items here. So let's get out of here and go into trying to get out of get out of here and go back into the, oh no, that's it. Sorry, that's it on this page, right? So from a training detail standpoint, what AutoML does, and this was actually like the data set isn't too large, but it was actually it did run for a little bit. And the reason why it's running for a little bit is because it's taking, like, it tells us how many rows it sampled, it takes how many training rows, but you see it ran 25 times, right? And it ran all these different kinds of models. So it's running different kinds of, tree models. It's running elastic net, right? It's running other kind of regressor models until it sees the best model. Basically, in this case, it's going to be the model that has the highest R squared. That's the model it's going to select, right? But you can see which had the highest and lowest R squared values from over here. Here's a random forest, which only gave us like, 0.55 R squared. And this is also the different hyperparameters that it selected. And when we're looking at featurization, we probably could have done this in the data flow itself, doing some kind of imputation, but Power BI AutoML handles all of that for us. What it does, and we don't have control over this, it's basically going to look at any kind of numerical value. If it's missing, it'll add the mean. If it's categorical, it'll basically just look at like the mode, right? And that's what it's going to impute as this imputation method. And then here is, I don't know why it's not showing up properly, but this is like if it used any other kind of ensemble learning methods, it'll just essentially show you what those are and give you some information on those particular methods. And that's the training details, right? It gives you a lot of information on what it selected and basically why it selected it and what kind of model it selected. Okay, any questions so far?
Nothing coming up.
No? Okay, cool. So now that we've got our model, AutoML, remember, it already picked our model, right? And it knows which model it's going to create. We have a scoring data set here. We want to apply this model to a data set that it hasn't seen before. And the way to do that is really simple, right? All we got to do is go into apply model. We're going to add a machine learning model. This time we're going to choose scoring data, and the outcome column, let's see here. Yeah, let me, scoring data. What, did I pick the right? A second. Oh no, I don't want to add a model. Sorry, I'm just looking at invoking this particular model here. Yeah, my computer's frozen. I'm gonna have to restart this page here. Hold on a second. Okay, yeah, for some reason, I don't know why it's not letting me basically apply the model, but what I would do in this case is, or do I have to go into machine learning? Oh yes, I'm sorry, I was in the wrong section. So what I want to do next is apply the model, okay? And applying the model, we actually have to go into this training report section, and we have to select what data source we're going to use as like the source of data that doesn't have the price in it. And then what's the outcome column supposed to be named? And it's going to be named house prices. This is going to be the actual price of that column where the prediction is going to come through. And then we just hit save and apply. Now this only gets applied when the data flow starts refreshing. So after the data flow refreshes, it's going to look at the data, it's going to run the model, it's going to do the prediction. And what that prediction looks like is basically, if I come into any one of these like enriched housing prices data, right? If I go all the way to right over here, this is the prediction that it made. And this is the scoring data set, right? This isn't something that the model has seen before. So this is the actual prediction. This is just basically a list of all the values, right? That it's made the prediction off of. And then from here, what we could do is we can go into Power BI desktop and create reports and look at the prediction of the particular house pricing data. Now, like put yourself in the shoes of maybe some retailer or some housing real estate agent that really needs to figure out what the prices of houses should be. They can now quickly and easily just input this data into here, run an AutoML model, and now they have some pretty good insight into what the prices of houses should be, so they can appropriately buy a house at the proper price or sell a house at the appropriate price. So they're not, necessarily. Hopefully, they're not losing as much, and they're gaining as much as they should have. Okay, so that's just one main advantage here, right? Doesn't really require any kind of special skill set to do this. So that's basically AutoML. The next item that I want to cover is invoking a machine learning model in Power BI. And I've been having computer problems. I was telling Brian earlier, so I apologize if things are a little slow on my end. What we're going to do here is we're going to instead of looking at the same, KC house prices training data set and doing something prediction on that, let's actually look at another data set, which is a diabetes data set. This data set, again, this is something that the model hasn't seen, and these are the variables that it's gonna use to make a prediction off of. The model that we predicted is already deployed in Azure machine learning. Okay. And if you ever notice, like there's stuff over here, this is basically how you would call like Azure machine learning, or you would call cognitive services. So if we wanted to call Azure machine learning, what we would do is over here, it would come up with all the deployed models that I have access to. And this now is making a call to AML, and it's looking at the various models. And I should come up with my diabetes model here. And once we have that, it automatically knows, like, it's mapping these columns to the column in the data set, right? So because these are named exactly the same, so it's really easy for us to do that. Once we hit OK, it's actually going to run the model, right? And it's going to create this record for us, and we can expand this column. And we can just select basically the diabetes prediction and the probability that it's within the range that it says that this is in. And that's really it. That's from like a machine learning standpoint, right? Like invoking the model, very straightforward, right? The hard part's already done. We just got to make a call to AML from here, pick our model, and then bring it in, and then let AML just do the rest. And from here, every time we refresh this data set and we get brand new data, it's going to make a call to Azure Machine Learning, and it's going to actually create this prediction for us. So that's essentially the machine learning side of the demo. Like I mentioned earlier, we're not doing any kind of fancy, programming or anything like that here, right? This is all literally clicking and drag and dropping. This model, the only hard part was this model was created in AML. Now, getting back to the slides here, because I want to set the stage for the next topic. And the next topic is focused around AI. With first is we'll see, and this is going to be pretty quick on how to do it, but we'll see how we can call cognitive services in Power BI. The good thing with this is there's no separate subscription you need for cognitive services, but you still need premium or premium per user. And this can also be invoked in the desktop or service. And then next, we'll look at some AI visuals. So we'll go into the Power BI service, we'll look at Q&A, and we'll look at smart narratives, and then we'll see quick insights as well, and key influencers visuals. So these are just visuals that Microsoft has provided that give you additional insight, right? So a lot of times you want prescriptive information rather than descriptive, right? So this is some of the things that can provide you that kind of context to your data. Oh, let me go back into here. So from a cognitive services standpoint, it will call only text and vision analytics. So from a text analytics, it can do language detection. So you essentially, it recognizes up to 120 languages. Sentiment analysis on your data. So you have some text and you want to basically say whether this is positive or negative. So anything that's closer to 0 is not good. Anything that's towards 1 is positive, and then it can do key phrase extraction as well. Okay, so looking at a bunch of key phrases and extracting those and putting those into a separate column. And then vision analytics, we're not going to get into this one, but it can do image tagging as well. And this is based off of over 2,000 objects that are already pre-trained, right? So all of this also within cognitive services are pre-trained models. We can't go in there and start messing around with them. It is what it is, right? If you want anything beyond this, you can go create your own models. But for the most part, these would suffice. These are actually using the cognitive services Azure service. When we're looking at key phrase extraction and text analytics, we have a comment here, and you can see this guy's like really pissed off, right? Like, can't believe you full shipped me the wrong item again. You know, I had a colleague of mine who's a Microsoft MVP. We were on a call together, and he was showcasing this capability to a client, and it literally had curse words, and you know, so just if you're doing this, just kind of be careful, right? You can have some vulgar language, you know, in here as well. But it does extract, right? So from a key phrase extraction standpoint, you can see foul up, you can see screw up, right? These are things that like it would normally take you a long time to read these comments, but with cognitive services, it makes it really simple for you to extract all this stuff without somebody having to sift through all this. And this gives you whether or not the sentiment is positive or negative. This is the output of what the language is. This is obviously English. And image tagging, it's actually going to return the tag. It's telling us this is a building, it's outdoors, right? It's thinking it's a government building, and it's made out of stone. So it kind of knows, like, give you some kind of description about that particular building. And this is the JSON that gets returned as well from that call. So let's get into the text analytics piece. And what we're going to do here is go into, going to discard that. We're going to go into Power Query, and we've got 2 queries here that we're going to use. Okay. The first one, I already did this, so I'm going to actually get out of there. So the first one is around sentiment analysis. We have comments here, and this is the same comment about tools and stuff, right? And we want to run sentiment analysis on this. And it's, again, we just go right over here, we hit text analytics, and this is going to give us a list of services that are available to us that we can call from cognitive services. And once that list comes up, we're going to select this is score sentiment, right? And we're going to select the column name and base it off of comment, and let's just leave everything as it is. And once we hit OK, it's now running cognitive services sentiment analysis on this particular column. And once it does that, you'll notice score came up, right? So something like calling, you know, the company fools, you would expect it to have a really, really low. Remember, something that's toward 0 is negative, and something that's really high, you know, is positive. So that's basically what sentiment analysis does for us. Key phrase extraction, very similar concept, right? We make it based off of the comment again, and we call the cognitive services API from here. And we literally go through the same exact process. We select extract key phrases, We tell this what column we want to base this off of. And from here, it's actually going to start creating a couple extra columns for us that show us this is like just one key phrase, but these are like key phrases. So you see a lot of unhappy customers and stuff like that. That's actually showing up over here. You know, pretty handy when you have a lot of text in your data set, which I mean, it's not really a best practice to have a lot of text in data sets, right? But if you do, you can actually run key phrase extraction on it. And I have a feeling, I haven't ran this on like really large data sets, right? But if you do, that's probably a word of caution, right? Like, is Power BI really the right place to do this? Probably not, because it's not going to compress this text as good as it does with like numerics and stuff like that, right? So those are examples from Power BI calling cognitive services. Now let's actually look into the Power BI service itself and look at some of the AI visual capabilities next. And I've already got this open using good old Contasso. What we could do here is we've got a bunch of charts over here. So the first thing we're going to do is we can actually let me just go into the reading view. What I could do is I can hit this get insights, and what it's going to do is it's going to evaluate whatever's on my chart. And I think this only, I don't remember exactly, but this only works on like, I think line charts and bar charts, and it doesn't work on like combination or bubbles. So that's why you're seeing, just this highlighted right now. And what this does is it tells us what anomalies occurred on on this chart. So in this example here, it's seeing an anomaly, and it's pretty obvious, right? But just for demonstration purposes, it's seeing an anomaly that sales amount was really high in 2013. So we can actually go into possible explanations of this, and it gives us a pretty nice chart with a normal, like what should have been a normal range for this particular sales amount. And here's some explanations, right? And it's saying this particular style is unusually high that could have lifted this sales amount. And there's this here as well, which is bikes, right? Bikes are a category within our data set that is also lifting that sales amount. So again, without us, like we already have this chart kind of telling us that, right? Which tells us bikes have our biggest sales amount. But if you didn't have a chart like this, you can run insights on your data, and you can see exactly what's happening behind the scenes and what's causing some of the anomalies here. And I believe you can run this actually on the data set as well, and that will probably take a little bit way longer than just running it on the single report. So the next item that we want to do is let's get into the smart narratives, actually, right? So this is a pretty cool capability. I'm going to pick on this bubble chart here, okay? And what I want to do is I want to right click this, and I'm going to hit summarize. And what it's doing here is creating a narrative for us. And sometimes these, oh, where'd it go? There it is. Here's this narrative for us, right? It's telling us Australia had the highest sales amount of, whatever it is, 9 million. And this is the order quantity. That's all it told us, right? I mean, it would be nice if it told us more things, but right now, this is all we get. However, we can actually start modifying this a little bit, right? So what if we want to see the lowest, right? Which item had the lowest? And I can see that like way down here, but maybe I want, instead of somebody looking at the chart, I want to just have some text that shows this to us. And I want this to be dynamic, because this data could change daily, right? Or could change monthly or weekly, however often the data is refreshed. So what we could do here is we can actually use like the Q&A capability within Smart Narratives and start adding our own values to this narrative. And what we're going to do in this example here, we want the text just like it is displayed up there. So the first thing is, let's tell Power BI we want to display the region with the lowest sales amount. And what this is going to do, and I'm just going to call this lowest sales amount region. And what this does is, you see how it says central there? If I hit save, you're going to see central over here now. Okay. And next, I want to see how this is going to be our lowest. So we can hard code that. We can hard code sales amount. But now we want to actually make this dynamic again. And what we want to see is at a region level, right? We want to see the region with the lowest sales amount and display that amount. So once we do that, it gives us the result of 3 million. And I'm just going to say lowest sales amount here, and I'm going to hit save, and that's going to give us that text. And then the final text is this isn't formatting properly here. Okay. And then the next step, and look, it already knows kind of what I'm doing, right? That's pretty neat over here. I didn't have to do anything. I'm just going to tab there, and order quantity is not 1345. It's actually going to be another value we're going to specify, and same exact thing as before. We're leveraging Q&A here with Power BI, and we're going to hit save. And now we've got, oh, it put it up here. Oops. Get rid of that. I actually want to place that value here instead of way up there. Right, so let's just keep it this way. I'm not going to mess around with the formatting too much. And now what we could do is we can pin it on the dashboard, or we can like leave it right over here for other people to start taking advantage of. And these numbers, right? So let's just look. That number matches exactly what I put into here, because I literally told Power BI what to look at, right? So that's smart narratives and also Q&A, like kind of baked into one demo. Any questions so far on this?
None currently.
None? All right. So you guys didn't just believe everything I'm saying. I like that. All right. Let's go into what are we gonna look at here? Key influencers. Okay. This is a visual here that it's basically what it's gonna show. I've already configured it because it does take like a couple minutes to execute. I am essentially gonna tell key influencers visual. That's a visual right over here. I'm gonna tell it to analyze the sales amount, and let's explain this by the region, product category, and subcategory. I can add a lot more in here if I wanted to. Now, what it's gonna do, instead of me creating like all these bar charts and stuff like that to look at things by different categories and drilling up and down, we have this one visual that's going to explain to us what are the top influencers from an increase and decrease standpoint for the explained by items that I put into here. So from the average, like now it's telling us the average sales amount is going to increase by this if the product category is bikes. And if it's mountain bikes, it's going to increase by this. And then when we're looking at regions, Australia, if you sell in Australia, you're going to get this lift. On the other hand, we also want to see like what causes decreases. So accessories cause a decrease by this amount, right? And these other things are also causing decreases by these particular amounts. So now what we probably would want to do, just because an accessory causes a decrease doesn't mean we're gonna get rid of it, right? Because this could cause some kind of this could be, I'm going to sell bikes plus I'm going to sell accessories. So I get more people into the store doing some cross-sell opportunities. But it does at least tell us like what it was increased or decreased, again, just by us putting things into the explain by. When we look at segments, it's also going to tell us what our top segments are. In this example here, top segment from the category name is bikes, and then the region is Australia, which we saw earlier, and it tells us, right, this is by how much sales amount is higher than the overall average, which averages this if I sell bikes in Australia. Okay. Same thing with being low, right? Like this is my poorest segment here. If I want to drill down onto that, when this might be pretty self-explanatory when it's not bikes, but when the product categories like bottles and cages, I don't even know what that is. Like our sales amount is really poor, right? And compared to what the average should be. So this again just shows us, without us having to do anything fancy here, what are some of the top and bottom drivers that are impacting the amount that I'm analyzing here. And in this case, it's just revenue. Okay, the last 10 minutes, what I want to do is showcase some capabilities from on the Python side of things. Okay, so what we could do with Python, and this is the same exact thing as R, right? What you can do, we can execute Python scripts in Power BI. And that's typically done through either using the visual of Python or R, or you can actually run the script in Power Query Editor. And in Power Query Editor, we can actually get data from a Python script, or we can start leveraging what's in that data set. And maybe we want to use pandas to do some modification to the data frame, right? Like it's going to treat it as a data frame and then spit that back out into Power Query. So that's something that we can do with Python and R. This might be a little bit dated in terms of version, but not every library is supported, and this isn't an exhaustive list of libraries, but the commonly used ones, right, are like matplotlib, scikit-learn, Seaborn. These are things that are really, really commonly used in Python. Let's get started. The first thing is, and these are going to be extremely, hello? Sorry, my computer just did something weird. These are going to be really basic examples of running Python scripts in Power BI. Let's look at custom visual first. Okay, so Python visual. The Python visual is not custom, it's out of the box. And before we start using this visual, we actually have to specify values here of what we want to put into the visual. And these values have to match exactly what we have in our data set. Okay, and this syntax here, data set buying car accessibility, has to be exactly this way because we're referencing data set in pandas now, right? And that data set is literally what I have in here. And what we're doing here, very simple, right? Just using pandas and matplotlib, we can create a basic visual. And because this is Power BI, we're leveraging these items here. We have the flexibility of bringing slicers into here, so doing a lot of interaction, which you can't really do that out of the box just by in Jupyter notebooks, for example, but you can do it here leveraging Python and Power BI. So once we go into here, we can copy and paste our Python code, and once it executes, it's going to come up with this particular visual. The one thing to know is, in order for you to have Python and even R, you have to have that installed on your computer in order for this to recognize that there is Python there, and you have to actually install these libraries in Python. Otherwise, it's not going to recognize these libraries. Just because you're doing an import here, that it is still not going to recognize that. You actually have to import these and install them in Python on your computer. Now, when we're talking about Power Query, we are going to do like the most basic kind of simple hello world example. What we can do is we can go into get data. And in our case, we're going to go into more. And in here, instead of us, leveraging Python for an existing transformation, we're actually going to use Python to get data. And the data we're going to get is again very simple, but you can make this as complex as you want. We're hard coding this into a list, right? And we're just converting that list into a data frame, and then we're printing that data frame. And once we do that, this navigator is going to show up just like how we connect to anything in Power BI. We're connecting to DF. This is a data frame. We can load it. We can do, additional transformations on it if we wanted to. So and that's, oh, where to go? Right here. So and that's what it looks like, right? And again, we still can enter additional sources. We can maybe, if we wanted to do additional run Python scripts on this, you can start adding your Python scripts. And here's where it says, this is a data set, right? That you have to have that name and convention has to be proper in order for you to do this. You put your Python script into here, then it's just going to come up with as an applied step on the bottom over here, and then you can continue doing whatever you're doing. Finally, the Jupyter Notebooks piece is again just another basic example on how to integrate with Python, and this came out I think last in 2021 sometime, I think in the summer. Okay, and what this allows us to do is actually embed embed Power BI reports into Jupyter Notebooks. So the first step is we need to install the Power BI client. For some reason, I don't know why. I did this before, it's not working anymore. Next step is to import the Power BI client libraries. So we're going to look at reports and we're going to look at models. We also have to do some kind of authentication. We authenticate Power BI using this interactive login. And once we do that, I'm hard coding stuff in here, but you would probably make REST API calls to loop through the group IDs and report IDs and do things that way rather than hard coding. For demo purposes, I'm just hard coding the group ID in here and the report ID. And once I pass that to this report function, I'm going to say group ID is equal to this. Report ID is that. We're going to authenticate using that authentication method, and we'll pass that into a report variable, and let's call that variable. And now I've got my report right over here. So embedding Power BI reports into Jupyter Notebooks, I thought it was pretty cool. I don't know. You got still, filtering. If you had any filters in the filter pane, those all get carried over. If I had slicers here, I can see those as well. But another cool thing we can do here, not just embedding stuff, right? Like this is pretty cool. This is a pretty neat feature that was brand new. So instead of, me maybe going into Matplotlib or something other library and doing this myself, I can now quickly look at it here. But the other thing, what I can do is I already have a really nice clean data set. I don't have to clean this data set. I want to take advantage of this data set. And the report, actually not even just the data set, I want to take advantage maybe of this here. This has elasticity, this has different customer name and category. I want to create my own charts off of this, for example, right? Or other, other analytics that you want to do in Python. What we're doing here is we're defining a function that's called getting the active page. And what this basically does, it just loops through this tab, and it's going to essentially get information for that page. And what kind of information is it going to get? It's basically just going to get like what visuals are on that page. So what I'm telling Python in here is this is the active page. This is the name of the report that we defined up above. Get the page name as well from that report. And then from visual side of things, let's pass this into, or let's get a list of visuals on that active page. Okay, so once we do that, we go into this function here, and we basically just look at wherever the visual type is equal to the pivot table, get that visual name. Once we have that visual name, we can actually call the report.export visual data function. We have to pass it the active name. We have to pass it the visual name. I'm just going to filter it on the top kind of 20 rows, and I'm going to put a print on this summarized exported data. And now I get this view here. Now I want to put this into a data frame because this is going to look ugly and I can't do anything with this in Python. So I'm going to put it into a data frame right over here using string IO, just call that summarized data, put it into the data frame and just view the top 5 of that data frame. Okay, now I got the data from that visual into a pandas data frame and I can do whatever I want to it, right? I just want to view customer name and price elasticity, and then I want to put that as df2, and I want to create maybe like a bar chart off of that, right? And I got that right here. So on that time, I am gonna stop the presentation now, and hopefully you guys found that it was found this pretty interesting.
Thank you so much, Imran.
Yep.